I wasn't even supposed to be in Aspen that weekend. The wine-tasting retreat had landed in my calendar thanks to a client who insisted I needed a break from being Brandon the businessman. In his words, I was becoming all solar panels and spreadsheets and not enough spontaneity. Which, in fairness, wasn't totally off. I run a solar energy company out of Colorado Springs. Built it from the ground up. Long hours, steady growth, nothing flashy. My life was solid. Predictable. And I guess a little gray. So I drove up to Aspen. Snow-dusted town full of people who wore scarves as statements and paid way too much for locally sourced air. I didn't expect to enjoy it. I figured I'd network a little, shake some hands, maybe catch up on emails from the hotel room. That first evening, I was sitting alone at a long wooden table at a vineyard just outside of town. Rustic charm, cheese boards that looked more like modern art, and the faint hum of a hired jazz trio. I just poured myself a glass of Zinfandel when someone slid into the empty seat across from me like she belonged there. Dana Monroe. She wore this oversized cream sweater with a rip near the collar and a necklace that looked handmade. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and she had these green eyes that darted around the room like she was always 10 seconds ahead of the conversation. She glanced at the wine I was sipping and said, "Zinfandel's a risky choice. People either love it or pretend to." I laughed, mostly because I had no idea what that meant, and told her it was just what the guy at the counter poured. "You mean Jonathan? He always goes for Zin first. He says it gets people talking." She mimicked his voice perfectly, then smiled at me like we were already in on the same joke. Turns out she'd been to this vineyard before. Used to consult on high-end interiors, mostly hotels and vacation rentals. Claimed she was taking a break and traveling with friends. But when I asked what she was taking a break from exactly, she got vague, said something about how people box themselves in with careers and that she was trying to unbox. That first night, I didn't think much of it. I just liked listening to her talk. Dana had this rhythm to her stories. They looped and meandered, but always came back to some unexpected punchline. And her laugh, it wasn't delicate or polite. It was full-on, throw-your-head-back laughter, the kind that made everyone nearby wonder what they were missing. We talked about everything and nothing. About favorite smells, she said fresh asphalt, I said cedar, weird childhood habits, hers, hiding pennies in her shoes, mine, lining up my crayons by sharpness, and the last time we cried, hers was from a Pixar short, mine was when my dog, Murphy, died 4 years ago. It wasn't deep talk, not really. But it was light in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. At some point, one of her friends wandered by, blonde hair, loud laugh, and teased, "Dana, another disappearing act?" Dana didn't miss a beat. She toasted her wine and said, "I'm unpredictable. That's the charm." Later that night, when we were walking through the parking lot toward our cars, I asked her what her friend meant. About the disappearing act? I clarified. Dana gave me the smirk like she was deciding how much to tell me. "Oh, that? Nothing serious. I used to be terrible at dating. If a guy bored me or tried too hard, I'd ghost. Leave mid-date sometimes. Not proud of it, but I'm reformed." I remember pausing, then half joking, "So should I be worried you're gonna vanish before dessert next time?" She tilted her head. "You're not boring. Yet." I should have taken that more seriously. But I didn't. Instead, I laughed, chalked it up to quirky charm, and asked for her number. We had brunch the next morning. A little cafe with too many succulents and a rotating menu. She ordered pancakes and immediately poured the syrup underneath them, saying it was a trust test for the plate. When the stack didn't collapse, she looked pleased. I still have no idea what that meant, but I found it weirdly endearing. We kept texting after that. Then calling. Then driving out to meet halfway between Aspen and Colorado Springs for lunches that turned into dinners. By month 2, she was staying over most weekends. By month 3, she brought a watercolor set into my house and never took it back. By month 6, we were living together. I've always been cautious with relationships. I don't rush. My last serious one ended 4 years earlier, and I wasn't exactly eager to jump back into anything. But Dana had this gravitational pull. She made life feel vibrant. Like anything could happen at any time. And after years of building a business, following routines, and checking the right boxes, that felt like oxygen. I met her parents over FaceTime. She said they were emotionally nomadic and lived out of a converted school bus in Northern California. They seemed nice enough. Her mom had a crystal hanging from the ceiling and asked for my birth chart. She met my family over Christmas. My parents loved her. My sister, Andrea, not so much. She told me Dana reminded her of a friend who always left halfway through plans and disappeared into her own drama. I told Andrea she was being judgmental. Looking back now, maybe she wasn't. But in the moment, I was all in. A year into dating, I proposed. I didn't make a big scene out of it, no flash mobs, no drone footage. Just me, her, a view of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and a ring I spent 2 months picking out. Dana said yes. She cried, actually. Said she didn't believe in forever, but she believed in this, whatever that meant. I took it as a yes. We started planning the wedding. Or really, she started planning. Dana dove in with the kind of energy most people save for Everest expeditions. Pinterest boards, vendor meetings, color palettes with names like Dusty Fig and Stormy Lilac. She was obsessed with every tiny detail, from napkin folds to the scent of the welcome candles. I didn't care about most of it. I just liked seeing her excited. And for a while, everything felt right. Like I'd found someone who pulled me out of my box just enough to breathe differently. What I didn't realize then was that she needed to keep moving to feel alive. And if something stood still long enough, especially love, she'd find a way to disappear from it. But that came later. For now, we were engaged. In love. Or at least, I thought we were. You ever notice how cracks in a wall don't start loud? You don't hear the first shift, the first fracture. It's just a faint line, barely visible, easy to paint over. That's what it was like with Dana. The first shift was subtle. Right after the engagement, she got obsessed with the wedding, but only certain parts. For someone who once said she didn't believe in labels, she sure threw herself into the aesthetics. Flower types, chair styles, whether the reception should be rustic whimsy or modern boho. She would spend hours scrolling mood boards, sketching layout ideas on scrap paper, or leaving voice memos about signature cocktails she wanted to try making. But she never talked about the vows. Never once asked about our ceremony script or whether we'd write our own. I brought it up one night, lightly, just curious, and she waved it off with a laugh. Let's not overthink the serious stuff. I just want it to feel like us. Then she changed the subject to table runners. At first, I told myself it was normal. Not everyone gets romantic about vows. Maybe it was just her way of managing nerves. But the more we planned, the more I noticed a pattern. She was excited about the event, just not the commitment. Then came the schedule changes. At first, they were small. Dana started staying out later on weeknights. She'd say she was meeting with vendors or grabbing drinks with her old design colleagues, or sometimes both. One Tuesday, she said she was touring a venue outside Fort Collins with a friend who was also getting married. When I asked if I could tag along just to see, she hesitated, then said it'd probably be too boring for me. Her phone started living on silent. She said it was to avoid distractions, but I couldn't help noticing how quickly she'd turn it over when a message came through. Once, I walked into the room and caught her swiping something off her laptop screen. She looked up a second too late, smiled, and said, just a group chat about the bachelorette party. Nothing juicy. She even added a wink like she was trying to sell it. I let it go. Or tried to. There's something that happens when doubt starts to creep in, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that whispers. You stop trusting your instincts. You question whether your gut is overreacting, whether you're being paranoid. You give benefit after benefit after benefit of the doubt because the alternative, that something's actually wrong, is too heavy to carry. But the whisper kept growing. She started using new language. Little things at first. She'd tell stories about her friends I barely knew, with this admiration in her voice, almost envy. Like the one who left her fiancé 2 months before the wedding to move to Mexico just to find herself. Dana called her brave. Another friend quit her job at an architecture firm and took up pottery in Vermont. Dana said she finally figured out what freedom feels like. I'd smile and nod, but something inside me curled up tighter each time. One night, we were sitting on the couch watching a movie when a wedding scene came on. You know, the big emotional moment, music swelling, vows being said. Dana didn't cry. She just looked at the screen, then at me, and said, "Do you think marriage is a romantic thing or just a transaction?" I blinked, caught off guard. Well, I guess that depends on how you approach it. She took a sip of wine and didn't respond. Just turned back to the screen. Later, when we were in bed, she mumbled something about how people think marriage means safety, but it really just means routine disguised as love. It wasn't even angry. Just factual, like she was reading it from a book. I asked, "Is that what you think ours is?" She rolled onto her side. I don't know. Sometimes I just wonder if people are in love with the idea of being chosen, not the person doing the choosing. I didn't sleep much that night. I started noticing the spaces between us more. Like how she never left her phone charging in the kitchen like she used to. It was always with her now, even when she showered. She started using her laptop less in common spaces and more in the guest room. She kept her browser closed when I walked by. And then there was the time she flinched when I reached for her purse to grab her keys. "Sorry," she said, way too quickly. Didn't expect you to touch my stuff. I wasn't trying to snoop. I had no reason to, really. But that knee-jerk reaction, it didn't feel right. Still, I rationalized. Maybe she was stressed. Weddings are pressure cookers and Dana had never been one for traditional stuff. She was probably just feeling boxed in, overwhelmed. That's what I told myself again and again. But deep down I knew. There's a look people get when their heart starts exiting a relationship before their body does. A kind of drift. Their eyes stop landing on you the same way. Their laugh doesn't come as freely around you even if they still say the words. They're present, but not really. And that was Dana day by day. The ** Macy between us changed too, not just physically, but emotionally. Conversations became shorter, shallower. She stopped asking about my day and started talking more about needing space to think or feeling suffocated by calendars and expectations. She claimed she was trying to reconnect with her creativity, that she was writing again, but I never saw any of it. Just heard about it vaguely, like a dream she didn't want me to read. One night I asked if she was happy. She paused, long enough for me to know the answer before she said anything. "I'm figuring that out," she said eventually. Then she reached for my hand, gave it a squeeze like she was comforting me, but it felt more like a reflex than affection. There's a grief that comes before the loss. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, like a hallway that used to echo and now doesn't. And that's what our house became. The excitement that used to buzz between us, those long, unfiltered late-night talks, the way she used to light up when I walked into a room, it all faded into soft, uncomfortable silence. But I stayed. Because love, when it's real, doesn't flinch at the first sign of doubt. It holds the line. Or at least, that's what I believed. I told myself things would even out after the wedding. That she'd find her rhythm again. That this was temporary. Just cold feet. But the more she pulled away, the more I realized this wasn't nerves. It wasn't stress. It was retreat. And I was starting to feel like the last man standing in a two-person future. It happened on a Wednesday, 9 days before the wedding. I remember because I was stuck in traffic on I-25, halfway through a podcast about behavioral economics and sipping lukewarm gas station coffee. Dana had texted me earlier that morning something about checking out the linens again, and I didn't respond right away. It was one of those mornings where everything felt normal on the surface even though, underneath, I was carrying this invisible weight. Then my phone buzzed. A new voice message from Dana. I assumed it was something logistical, timing for a call with the florist or a reminder about the seating chart we still hadn't finalized. I pressed play without thinking, letting it play over the car's speaker as I merged lanes. But it wasn't meant for me. It was her voice, but not the version of her I knew. Not the bright, teasing Dana who danced around the kitchen with a wine glass in one hand and a spatula in the other. This Dana sounded half laughing, half exhausted. She was talking fast, her words spilling over each other. The audio was grainy, but I recognized the name. Rachel. Her old friend from Chicago, the one she said had zero filter and too many opinions. I'd met her once at a brunch and immediately understood what Dana meant. Rachel had this energy, always cutting to the chase. And Dana usually rolled her eyes at it until now. I don't remember every word perfectly, but I'll never forget the shape of them. The tone. The parts that landed like punches. "I don't know, Rach, he's just so, I don't even know how to explain it. Safe? Like he's a walking mortgage. You know what I mean? He's not bad. He's great, actually. He remembers birthdays, he folds laundry without being asked, he makes sure I eat. But it's like a marrying beige. Like emotionally beige." She laughed. "Not the charming kind. The nervous kind. The kind you let out when you know you're admitting something ugly, and you don't want to sit in the silence afterward. Sometimes I imagine the rest of my life and it just looks like one long brunch with a guy who color codes his Google Calendar. And I think, is this really it? Is this who I am now? I mean, yeah, he loves me, but maybe too much. It's not fire, it's comfort. I feel boxed in, like I'm signing up to disappear. Quietly, neatly, forever. Then a pause. Then the kicker. Maybe I just needed him to get me through the hard part. But I don't know if I want to keep going with him. I don't know if I ever did. Silence. End of message. I didn't realize I'd pulled onto the shoulder until the tires crunched against gravel. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. I just sat there, engine humming, staring at the road ahead but not seeing any of it. Played it again and again. I kept hoping I'd misheard something, that I'd find a different tone in her voice if I just listened closer. Maybe it was a vent. Maybe she was spiraling. Maybe she didn't mean it. But no matter how many times I listened, the same thing hit me. She wasn't unsure. She wasn't lost. She was certain. She didn't send that message by mistake because she was emotional. She sent it because she was unguarded. Because that's how she talked when she thought I wasn't listening. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the realization that I was being second-guessed. It was the way she described me. Not unkindly, not cruelly, just passively. Like I was a footnote in her life. An accessory. A security blanket with a mortgage and health insurance. Beige. I've been called a lot of things in my life. Predictable. Grounded. Even a little boring. But never beige. Beige meant invisible. Beige meant compromise. Beige meant forgettable. I sat in that car for 36 minutes. I know because I checked the timestamp later. No music, no calls. Just me and that stupid voice memo playing on repeat until I knew it by heart. When I finally got home, Dana wasn't there. She was at yoga, according to her calendar. I walked into the house we'd picked together, past the stack of RSVP cards and the framed engagement photo on the hallway table, and something inside me snapped into place. Clarity. For months I'd been rationalizing her distance, making excuses for her late nights, brushing off her cryptic comments about freedom and labels. I'd swallowed every red flag and called it a sunset. But now the truth sat in my pocket, 26 seconds long, and I couldn't unhear it. She was never in this fully. Maybe she liked me. Maybe she even loved me in some way. But it wasn't the kind of love that rooted itself and stayed. It was the kind that passed through, borrowing the warmth until something brighter came along. When she came home that night, I didn't say a word. She kissed me on the cheek, mentioned something about the wedding playlist, then asked if I wanted Indian food or Thai. I chose Thai, ate half of it, smiled when she made a joke about pad CEW being a metaphor for marriage, pretended I wasn't unraveling with every word she spoke. I couldn't confront her, not yet. Not because I didn't have the courage, but because I knew she didn't deserve the drama. She didn't deserve my hurt laid out in real time like some grand act of heartbreak. No, if she wanted distance, I was going to give it to her. Fully, completely, permanently. So the next morning, before she woke up, I packed a bag. A small one, just the essentials. Left my ring on the kitchen counter, right next to her favorite mug. And I wrote a note. Short, honest, the opposite of beige. I heard the message, and I believe you meant every word. I won't be anyone's beige. I won't be chosen out of safety. I'm walking away, not because I stopped loving you, but because you never truly did. No shouting, no accusations, just truth. I locked the door behind me and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first. Just away. Away from the life we almost built. Away from the woman who saw me as a placeholder. Pit stop. I canceled the wedding that afternoon, called every vendor, sent emails to our guests, even forwarded the voice memo to a few people. Just enough so that I wouldn't have to explain myself. I figured the ones who mattered would understand. The rest didn't need to. She tried reaching out. Texts, calls, voicemails, all of them spilling with confusion and thinly veiled panic. I didn't mean it like that. It was just venting. I was spiraling. I didn't know what I was saying, but I knew better. I'd listened too closely. Her voice wasn't spiraling in that recording. It was steady, focused, honest, maybe the most honest I'd ever heard her. She wasn't having a breakdown. She was making a choice, just not out loud. So I made mine. And for once, I didn't second-guess it. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was staying gone. When I walked out that morning, bag in hand, ring on the counter, note folded neatly beside her coffee mug, I thought I'd feel wrecked. I expected the collapse, the shaky hands, the second thoughts. But what came instead was silence. Not the absence of noise kind. The kind that fills a space after you've stopped fighting what you already knew. I didn't go far at first. Just checked into a hotel in downtown Boulder and turned off every notification that didn't come from my lawyer, my assistant, or my sister, Andrea. I left my personal phone on silent and faced it screen down. Every buzz was probably Dana. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, not because I missed it, but because I didn't trust myself not to respond. You don't spend over a year building a life with someone and walk away clean. Even when you know it's right. Especially then. That first night, I lay in a hotel bed that smelled like bleach and corporate neutrality, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything I just detonated. The guest list. The vows I never got to say. The honeymoon reservations in Belize. The part of my closet where her shoes still sat like they didn't know they'd been orphaned. And still, I didn't go back. I kept waiting for the crash. For the moment it would all catch up to me and I'd feel hollowed out. But I didn't. Not the way I expected. I felt the ache, yeah. But it was a clean kind of ache. The kind that comes after setting a bone straight. The morning after I left, Dana texted me 13 times. Voicemails followed. Then emails. The subject line of the first one read, simply, please. The message itself was 6 paragraphs long. Rambling. Apologetic. Defensive. Contradictory. She said it was a mistake. Said she was venting. Said Rachel had pushed her to be honest about feelings she didn't even know she had. Said I'd taken it out of context. That she'd been spiraling but she loved me. That I was the only thing keeping her grounded. That she was just scared. I didn't reply. Because I'd listened to the voice memo again, this time not for what was said, but how. She hadn't sounded scared. She hadn't sounded like someone unraveling. She'd sounded calm. Certain. Like someone describing a choice they were already living with even if they hadn't spoken it aloud. There's this moment right after the truth hits you where you think maybe you imagined it. Maybe you're the one who misunderstood or misheard or overreacted. And then you remember, no, you didn't. You heard her. You heard her say you were beige. And not even angry beige. Not sad or bitter or betrayed. Just uninspired. Dana didn't regret what she said. She regretted that I heard it. So I left her in that moment. In her own story. In the one she narrated to Rachel with the sighs and the half-laughs and the words that weighed more than she realized. I spent the next few days doing the mundane but necessary things. Canceling the wedding wasn't as dramatic as I imagined it'd be. The florist was understanding. The caterer tried to offer a partial refund. The venue coordinator sounded genuinely sad, said we were one of the easy couples. Ironic considering the storm brewing behind the scenes. I wrote a short email to our guests. Simple. Respectful. Dear friends and family, with a heavy heart, I want to let you know the wedding has been called off. We both need time and space to reflect, and I hope you'll respect that. Your support means everything. That was it. No drama. No gossip fodder. Just the truth dressed in neutral language. Andrea called me 20 minutes later. I knew something was off, she said. Are you okay? Yeah, I said. And I meant it. I forwarded her the voice memo. She listened in silence. When she was done, she just said, you did the right thing. And that was all I needed to hear. Dana, meanwhile, wasn't done talking. Her voicemails got longer, her tone shakier. One of them started with, I know you hate me, and ended with, please just tell me if this is really it. Another one rambled for 4.5 minutes, looping between, I didn't mean it, and I don't know why I said it, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I never responded. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I'd already said it in a quiet kitchen with a pen and a folded note that held more grace than she'd ever earned. I'd already done the hardest part, walking away while still loving her. And that's something nobody really tells you about. That sometimes you'll love someone who doesn't see you. Not really. They'll see what you offer, stability, consistency, warmth, but they won't see you. Not the man who shows up on the worst days, not the one who chooses quietly every morning to stay. And when they finally look up and realize what they had, you'll already be gone. The turning point came 3 days later. I was walking along a creek path near the hotel, headphones in, just trying to stay in motion. I passed a couple on a bench, maybe in their 60s. They were holding hands and not saying anything. Just looking out at the water like it was enough. That's what I'd wanted. Not fireworks. Not chaos. Just a kind of calm that didn't feel like settling. And for a while, I thought I had that with Dana. But what she wanted wasn't calm. It was momentum. Movement for movement's sake. And when stillness came, she mistook it for suffocation. So I stopped chasing the apology I'd never fully get. I started forwarding vendor refunds to my accountant. Started packing the things Dana had left in my house, her paintbrushes, her tea stash, the scarf she said she stole from a thrift shop in Telluride. I boxed them up carefully, labeled them, and dropped them off at Rachel's place. I didn't knock. She texted me later that night. Just one sentence. You deserve better. I didn't reply to that either. A week passed. Then, too, Dana's messages slowed. The last one was just a text. I hope you find someone who makes you feel more than beige. I read it, deleted it, and finally turned off the phone for good. That was the last time I heard from her. The silence that followed was a strange companion. Not entirely welcome, but not unwanted either. It followed me to coffee shops, to the gym, to quiet hikes in Chautauqua Park. But instead of filling it with distractions, I started listening to it. It told me things I hadn't let myself hear before. Like how often I'd been shrinking to keep peace. How often I'd accepted uncertainty in exchange for moments of charm. How I'd convinced myself that love meant adjusting your shape until someone else could fit into it. But real love doesn't ask for erasure. It asks for showing up. Fully. Clearly. Repeatedly. And that's what I was learning to do again, not for someone else, but for myself. Because walking away didn't break me. Staying would have. I didn't hear much about Dana after I left. People ask me sometimes if that was hard, cutting her off so cleanly, letting the silence stretch without trying to tie it up with closure or mature conversation. Honestly? No. The hardest part had already passed. The heartbreak wasn't in the leaving, it was in realizing I was never really chosen in the way I chose her. But even silence echoes if you listen long enough. And eventually, some of those echoes reached me. It started with a message from Jen, mutual friend of ours, more her friend than mine. We'd met her at a wedding expo early on and kept in casual touch after. She'd helped Dana brainstorm centerpiece designs and Instagram captions for our engagement announcement. Jen was always upbeat, always in the know, and mostly stayed out of people's messes. Her text came about 6 weeks after I canceled the wedding. No emojis. No preamble. Just, I thought you should know Dana's living in Salt Lake now. With her sister. Working at a store or something. Take care. At first, I didn't think much of it. People move. People start over. But later that night, I opened Dana's Instagram for the first time since everything ended. It was gone. Not deactivated. Not curated down. Just gone, vanished like it had never existed. The same account that used to post spontaneous selfies from hiking trails, paint-splattered color palettes, *TS of almond milk cappuccinos captioned with quotes like, live in moments, not for them, completely wiped from the world. A few old tagged photos still remained on friends' pages, smiling group *TS, a handful of black and white candids, but even those were older. Nothing recent. Nothing post-voice memo. I clicked through a few of her friends' accounts, purely out of curiosity. Most hadn't mentioned her. But one story caught my eye, Rachel's, of all people. The same Rachel from the voice message. She'd posted a blurry clip of a mountaintop sunrise set to Bon Iver with a caption that read, for anyone wondering, letting go means not calling just because you're lonely. You owe yourself honesty. Not recycling ghosts. I didn't need a name to know who it was about. Dana had vanished, not in the dramatic, scandal-soaked kind of way. Not with a grand finale or a broadcasted meltdown. No messy posts, no blame-laying, no indirect subtweets. Just a quiet disappearance into the backdrop of someone else's life. Later, through a more talkative friend of Andrea's who lived near Salt Lake, I got a clearer picture. Dana had moved in with her sister, Emma, I think her name was, who lived in a townhouse on the outskirts of the city. She wasn't doing design anymore. Not even freelance. No consulting, no portfolio updates, no trendy design showcases. She was working at a health food store downtown. Register shifts, stocking shelves, folding receipts. That image stuck with me more than anything. Dana Monroe, the girl who once said stability was a slow form of dying, now asking if customers wanted their vitamin *TS cold-pressed or blended. I don't say that to mock her. Not even close. I kept thinking about that phrase. Emotional beige. She'd thrown it at me like a diagnosis. As if choosing consistency meant forfeiting passion. As if dependability were a weakness. But now, the woman who had talked endlessly about escaping routine, about chasing fire instead of comfort, had folded herself into a quiet life that didn't even look like her. I wondered if she was happy. Not in a bitter way. Genuinely. I wondered if she looked around at the store, at the almond butter jars and protein bars and dusty air purifiers, and thought, this isn't beige. This is peace. Or if she woke up each morning trying to remember when exactly she'd stopped running and started retreating. I don't know. Maybe both. Because the thing about Dana was, she was never fake. Not really. Just unfinished. A little lost. She spoke with such certainty about how the world should be, how love should feel, that I think she convinced herself it was the same thing as living it. But when reality didn't match the poetry, she turned inward instead of forward. And I get it. I really do. We all chase something, freedom, success, validation. For Dana, it was escape. For me, it was permanence. I just didn't realize how incompatible those two things were until we collided head-on. It's strange, Seeing someone shrink from the version of themselves you once knew. Not in size, but in presence. Dana had always filled rooms with energy, ideas, mischief. She was light in motion. But the more I heard, the more it sounded like she dimmed that light. Not out of punishment, but maybe out of exhaustion. You can only outrun yourself for so long. I learned that too in my own way. What surprised me most, though, was how few people reached out to defend her. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't seem surprised. Like the wedding unraveling, the voice memo, the aftermath. It all fit some pattern they'd quietly seen before but never named aloud. Even Rachel, from what I gathered, had taken a step back. Whatever history they had, it couldn't withstand the weight of Dana's half-truths and sudden exits. And in a way, I think that's what finally caught up to her. Not my departure, not the cancellation, but the realization that all the doors she'd flung open over the years, every risk, every leap, I'm just figuring it out, had started closing behind her. One by one. What happens when the chaos stops being romantic? When spontaneity turns into instability? When the people around you stop being charmed and start being tired? That's the part of the story no one writes poems about. And yet, despite all of that, I didn't hate her. If anything, I pitied her. But not in the condescending way. In the human way. The kind of pity that comes from having once loved someone deeply and realizing they never truly loved themselves enough to stay. One afternoon, Andrea asked me if I ever thought about reaching out. Just one message. One honest, no frills, no dramatics message. Would it help either of you? She asked. I thought about it. About what I'd say. Maybe something like, I hope you found what you were looking for. I hope it's enough. But I didn't send it. Because some goodbyes aren't meant to be reopened. Some lessons only stick when they hurt in private. And some people, no matter how much they mean to us at one point, can only walk their path alone. Dana had chosen her version of freedom. I had chosen mine. And that was that. I didn't bounce back right away. That's not how it works. The weeks after the canceled wedding were quieter than I expected. There was no dramatic weight lifted. Just stillness. A kind I hadn't felt in a long time. I spent more time in the mountains, sometimes just walking without a set destination. Boulder had always been beautiful, but I started seeing it with new eyes. Less as a backdrop, more as a place to finally breathe. I threw myself into work, not to bury things but to steady myself. My company expanded faster than planned. I took on 2 new hires, invested in local energy partnerships, and started mentoring a couple of young founders who reminded me of myself 5 years ago. Ambitious, a little naive, and still learning how to hold their ground. But the biggest change came in the way I thought about love. I realized I'd spent years equating commitment with compromise. As if being stable meant I had to be less interesting, less spontaneous, less myself. But the truth is, you don't have to dim your light to make someone stay. You just need the right person who sees it and never asks you to change the bulb. I got back into trail running, picked up kayaking again, read more, ate better, laughed more. And somewhere in all that space, between letting go and leveling up, I stopped looking backward. 2 years later, I met Ellie. It wasn't a grand entrance or some whirlwind meet-cute. She was giving a lecture on native plants at the university, and I tagged along with a friend who swore it'd expand my worldview. Ellie was a botany professor, soft-spoken, grounded, funny in this incredibly dry way that took you a second to catch. We ended up talking afterward about the parallels between ecological balance and emotional resilience. She said the healthiest things are usually the most quietly complex. I remember just sitting with that, letting it settle. We didn't rush. She didn't ask me to prove myself. She didn't romanticize unpredictability or measure passion by how loud it burned. She just showed up. Fully. Kindly. Consistently. One night, a few months in, I told her the short version of the Dana story. I left out the voice memo, the ring, the phrase emotional beige. Just said I'd been someone's second best and I wasn't doing that again. Ellie didn't say anything right away. She just took my hand and said, calm isn't boring. It's rare. That's when I knew. With her, I felt seen. Not for what I offered, not for my potential, not for the life I could provide. Just seen. As I was. No edits. No filters. No performance required. This time, there were no buried doubts. No late-night whispers to someone else. No second-guessing hidden behind curated smiles. Just two people choosing each other. Every day. Without fear. Without settling. And that, after everything, made all the difference.